Hello, and welcome to the panel discussion of Põder in the context of Estonian art. Accompanying to wonderfully comprehensive exhibition Space for My Body, curated by Cecilia Alemani in Schurz Museum in Switzerland. We are really happy for Cecilia Alemani's interest and Schurz Museum generosity to host this amazing survey on Põder's work. It was a pleasure to host also Cecilia in Tallinn, to drive around in Soviet area sleeping block to see where Põder used to work and have her studio and explore a bit of context where Põder is coming. Just to give you the brief context, Põder is one of the most original and significant Estonian sculptures and installation artist from the 20th and 21st century. In her practice, she's exploring the human body and its fragility. Her works are particularly striking due to her artistic ability to express the mental and physical experience of daily life. And she works with a really experimental and performative sculpture forms. Also, throughout her career, she has been experimenting with new abstract forms and variety of materials, from plaster and wood, charcoal and textile to light, scent, and even taste. And what's also maybe really special to note is the context and time frame where Põder worked. So she started her artistic practice in a really, really deep Soviet time, when Estonia was a bit like kind of had a different narrative from the Western art world and was living under the Soviet area. Then throughout the wild 90s, where Estonia gained independence, up to the zeros when Estonia aligned itself more with kind of, let's say, Western narratives and became independent and part of European Union. So this is the kind of like maybe time frame wise, which Katrin will look into more deeply, but kind of the context in a time frame wise. But we talk about it in a second bit more. Before that, I would like to introduce our brilliant panelists. I also start with alphabetical order, so to be fair. So let's start with Edith Karlsson. Edith Karlsson is an Estonian artist based in Tallinn, who is representing Estonia in upcoming Venice Biennial with a great sculpture installation. Edith studied sculpture in the Department of Installation and Sculpture in the Estonian Academy of Arts. Throughout her practice, she has been interested of depicting animals and people as a main protagonist. Her often large-scale sculpture pieces produced by means of mixed techniques show a variety of characters, from ceramic dogs to the cement dinosaurs and Neanderthals, composed into this really amazing, sensitive installations and spatial installations. Karlsson also has collaborated with art collective Gelatin and British artist Sarah Lucas. And I would say, if we talk about contemporary sculpture in Estonia and masterfulness of the materials and sensitive dramaturgical approach, then Edith's name is one not to miss out. Katrin Kivimaa is an independent art historian, culture critic, and translator. Her research interests include feminist art history, modern and contemporary Estonian art, nationalism and art, feminist curating, and the historiography of Estonian art history. For many years, she has worked as a senior researcher and professor at the Institute of Art and Visual Culture in the Estonian Academy of Arts. In 2010, she co-curated the exhibition The Soviet Woman in Estonian Art at Kumu Art Museum. And in 2008 up to 2010, she was a member of a research team for the exhibition Gender Check, femininity and masculinity in the art of Eastern Europe in Vienna and Warsaw, which she will, I think, talk a bit more about later. She is also author of numerous publications, include National and Modern Femininities in Estonian Art, 1850 up to 2000, and working with a feminist, curating and exhibitions in Estonian Eastern Europe. Berit Teer, our third panelist, is an artist and cultural manager. She has practiced jewelry and photography and installation art, and her most noteworthy exhibitions are those with the artist group FFF, Fun for Five Females, which was active in 96 up to 2005. Over the past 20 years, Teer has edited publications, designed and curated exhibitions, including Fashion and the Cold War at Kumu Art Museum, Tallinn in 2012, which was co-curated with Eha Komissarov. Berit Teer currently works in the production company called Valge Kuup Studio, where she manages international art projects, including collaboration with the state of Anu Põder to preserve and represent the sculpture's legacy. So also Berit has a really good insight of making of the current exhibition in Sush, and really like deep knowledge on Anu Põder's archive. And I am Maria Arusa. I'm director of Estonian Contemporary Art Center, also a curator. And today I'm in a role of moderator in this panel. And also me and Edith, we are working together for upcoming Estonian Pavilion in Venice. So this is my role here. But it's really special to be together in this panel, Anu Põder in the context of Estonian art. And I would say that Anu Põder doesn't just hold a special place in Estonian art history, but also I think in everyone's heart, because when we prepared this panel, we also shared a couple of stories and personal stories. So also today in that panel, we tried to give you a bit more wider context, especially thinking of Estonian art history and the Estonian art field, but also going to a bit more like personal aspects of Anu's practice. But to start now with discussion or with the panel, I would first of all give word to Katrin Kivimaa. And Katrin, maybe you could open up a bit more the Soviet Estonian context and the role of female artists and also Anu Põder in it, because Anu somehow didn't fall into this line of principles which were so-called bronze area in Estonian art in Soviet time, which I guess we can talk more, but I think especially in your context, it would be also super exciting to hear later, like this kind of development of a timeline and how Anu entered into the feminist art exhibitions, because you are one of the founding member of Estonian feminist art, if you could say, and feminist curating here. So Anu, Katrin, I would give word to you.
Thank you, Maria. You're very kind to introduce me as one of the founding members, but indeed the feminist discourse entered Estonian art scene at the time when I was a young art historian and critic predominantly, and so it was very much the younger generation, I could say my generation of younger artists who sort of started this feminist revolution in Estonian art. And Anu Põder's role, of course, was slightly different in that, and I will talk about it a little bit, especially because she was, first of all, of a different generation, and also it seems to me that she was very much an independent artistic personality. She didn't sort of belong to any groups, and she always followed her own route. But to talk about the context, of course, the late Estonian Soviet sculpture was especially the one which we see nowadays as our public heritage, was very conservative by contemporary standards, and it was very much based on classical language of sculpture. And we have to make differentiation here between the official commissions, which were usually public art, and Anu Põder didn't make these. So the official commissions also fell into different categories. Some were political events, commemorating political events or political figures, which was very much governed by the the prescriptions of Soviet ideology. But then there was the area which a lot of contemporaries of Anu Põder were involved with, was a depiction of the figures, important figures from Estonian culture. So this is something which we have as a heritage from that area, especially in our public space. But also more experimental approach in sculpture was present, abstraction, or sort of modernist tendencies, which was possible to do in the areas which were called so-called of monumental art or more decorative art, which was used as an interior design or as a design element for different types of institutions and buildings. So this was very broadly that different type of context in which Anu Põder chose to become a sculptor. And as I already said, she never engaged with that official part of late Estonian sculptural practice. So you already mentioned that area was called, that era was called the Bronze Age, and it's true because that was the most widespread, most popular material for sculpture in the 1970s and also 1980s. And this had to do with the fact that, first of all, because it was very much considered the proper material for classical language of sculpture, and obviously all the public monuments were using either stone or metal, but also the exhibition sculpture, which was much more experimental, quite often used bronze as a material. So in that sense, it's really already, something which we have to take into account, that Anu Põder's choice of materials was very much idiosyncratic and very different from what was the Estonian sculptural school at the time. What was another important contextual point to make is that in the 70s and already before, there was a tradition of large number of Estonian women sculptors. So the first generation of women sculptors emerged in the 1930s and early 40s. Then they studied in Tartu, which is the second largest town in Estonia, in the art school there. And a lot of them obviously emigrated due to Soviet occupation and continued their work abroad. But in the 70s, when Anu Põder was studying at the Art Academy from 1970 to 76, there was a large number of very interesting women sculptors. So that in that sense, there was a tradition that women could become sculptors, and they did become sculptors. And in that sense, she was, you can't say that tradition didn't exist in Estonia. Now, talking about her education, it's been said, and this is true, that the education model at the Art Academy at the time was rather conservative. Obviously, the educational models and the art scene itself had changed a lot from the times of socialist realism and also socialist modernism, but predominantly it was still very much concentrated on realist depiction. And as I already mentioned, then there were already some more experimental and abstract tendencies also present. In terms of influences, already during the time when she was a student, what's been mentioned is pop art, which was very vivid and very popular starting from the late 60s in Estonia. And also Anu Põder herself, she has, in many interviews, she has acknowledged the influence of pop art on her practice, and also the influence of surrealism, the 20th century, very, in popular art language, not just in the Western Europe, but also in the Central Europe and many other parts of Europe. So that is also the influence which has been noted in relation to her art. And perhaps it's also important to acknowledge that at the time, in the 70s, when she was a student, it was very difficult for students or artists from Estonia to travel abroad. And so the contact with the art world somewhere else came only through mediation. The lectures on modern art did exist at the Art Academy. Also, some books, not many, but there were books which were both which were translated as samistats. So they were kind of circulating privately among artists and art historians. But the art magazines published, especially in GDR and Poland, were available in Estonia publicly. They were, available in the libraries, including the library of the Art Academy. But also American art magazines were circulating. So you could say that obviously, Estonia, the art world wasn't completely cut off from the tendencies and from the new movements of the art which was happening in American art or Western Europe. And they were very familiar with what was happening, or quite familiar with what was happening in the Eastern and Central Europe. So when Anu Põder finished the Art Academy, she herself said that then the pop art influences perhaps were not that important to her, and she said herself that she concentrated her artistic practice on the use of material of sculpture and on the ways how to mix different materials. And it's been already mentioned that one of the ways she was so unusual and idiosyncratic in the local art scene was that she, as opposed to pretty much most of her colleagues, she was using soft, everyday materials to create her sculptures: textile, wax, soap, plastic, also wood. And she started to exhibit actively in the 1980s, and she was noticed. From the 1980s, perhaps the most notable works are her soft female figures. And again, they were truly unique in Estonian art. And what was interesting, of course, that the context and especially the frames for interpretation for her work were perhaps not in place. And this is why her raise to both, especially to international fame, happens much, much later. But this is not to say that she was not noticed. I mean, she received in 1979, she received an award, a Young Artist Award. 1990, another award from Estonian Artists Association. Also, there has been a short film made, or like a TV program by national TV. And she exhibited actively, and she was also written about. But yet, one could say that the arrival of feminist discourse in early 90s, in the first part of the 90s, opened up a totally different way and knew how to understand and interpret her work. I do think that it's important to acknowledge and respect Anu Põder's own position that she didn't really identify with feminist movement and feminist ideas. I mean, she was, first of all, she was an artist. She was very private individual. She didn't want to belong to any groups, as far as I can understand. And she said that her concern is to make art, to make sculptures, to work with material and technique. And she wasn't opposed to new types of interpretation. She wasn't opposed to feminist interpretation by critics, but she said it's kind of their concern. Yet, it's obvious that her art emanates from her personal experiences as a woman. And this is something which she has also never denied in her interviews. She has several times said that, pointed out how her work is related to her everyday life, her experiences of being a woman, her experiences of motherhood, which they emphasized on several occasions. And so in that sense, it's her own description also which lays foundation for not just her work, which lays foundation to incorporating her work into feminist discourse. And she has said something quite interesting about what's been motivation and inspiration for her art, that she considered herself as a woman, she considered herself physically more fragile, physically more weaker, but she decided to turn this fragility into strengths and to create her artworks based on that. Her body of work include quite different themes and also different types of objects. But I just want to point out, perhaps for me, what do stand out is, of course, the female body, which is often fragmented, semi-erotic, distorted, quite enigmatic as well. But the second type of works which stand out for me are the symbolic objects which relate to bodily memory, and such as clothes, footwear, but also furniture, old farmhouse furniture, which she has used. And these sculptures refer not only to her personal memories, but they also evoke the history of collective Estonian memory as well. Yes, so taking into account this idiosyncratic use of impermanent soft materials and also the centrality of her work on female bodily form and personal memories, it's quite logical, actually, that she was taken up by emerging feminist curating and feminist art history discourse. And I just give a very brief timeline of the exhibitions in which she was exhibiting. The first time, actually, any exhibition in Estonia evoked a feminist standpoint or feminist context was in 1994. It was an exhibition, Codex, curated by Reet Varblane, and that included Swedish artists who were already obviously coming from a very different cultural and political background. The young Swedish artists strongly identified as feminist artists. And then their work was juxtaposed with works of 3 Estonian women artists, one painter already from the pre-war Estonian Republic, and then 2 contemporary artists, one of which was Põder. And her exhibit was entitled Softly in the Light. It included 6 works from the early 1990s. And these were very personal works with a strong sense of material and form. And curator Reet Varblane described these sculptures in soft materials as the symbols of a strong, resilient woman. And for instance, one of the works, long back from 1994, contained references to classical female figures carved from stone, but this is but it's been executed in textile. And Anu Põder herself described the choice of material at the time as follows, that there was a time when helplessness and incompetence led to a sense of aversion to work, until I realized that as a woman, I should take advantage of my weakness. I settled for materials that were convenient for me, end quote. It's really interesting perhaps to comment that, that statement, because she was also working as a freelance artist until 86, if I'm correct. She was a single mother of 3 girls. And later she was earning her living as an art teacher at the art school. And then already during independent Estonia, she was working as a teacher of sculpture at the Art Academy. But it's been interesting that a slightly older colleague of hers, Mare Mikov, has quite several times said that the women artists at the time in the 70s or early 80s, that often they were basically forced to use different materials, because unless they had a public commission for the work, but bronze actually was much more expensive. And I'm not saying this is necessarily the only reason, but that was obviously something which we do have to take into account and to understand that there is a difference between the commissioned work and the works produced by a freelance artist for the exhibitions. But of course, Anu Põder also has said that she very much wanted to break away from that bronze material and that classical sculpture. So she was indeed turning, as she said, her weakness and incompetence into strengths. In the early 90s, when Estonian art life opened up to international scene, and there were quite a few group exhibitions, sort of survey exhibitions, which introduced Estonian contemporary art to Scandinavia or to Central European countries. And in these exhibitions, actually, Anu Põder's work was not included. So obviously, there was some how would I say, perhaps marginalization of sculpture in general, because now the interest turned towards installation, photography. Also painting has been very, very important and perhaps more appreciated in Estonian context than sculpture. But she did, as I said, she was incorporated into some of the feminist exhibitions. She also participated in 1996 in the big, perhaps the most important annual exhibition organized by the Center of Contemporary Art. So she continued to exhibit very actively. Now, regarding her, let's say, gradual incorporation into feminist discourse, in 2009 and 2010, when I was very privileged to be able to work in the team which prepared the materials for gender check exhibition in Vienna and Warsaw, which was curated by absolutely wonderful art historian and curator Bojana Page, then I also proposed, among other artists, I proposed one work by Anu Põder, and that was her work from 1985, a doll which was made to walk, which was very characteristic of that period. The soft material mixed with pieces of plastic and the dolls, which the female figures, which she called dolls, which also in some ways might refer back to her memories of playing with dolls as a child, but also bringing forward the bodily existence of a female. So I think that was a little bit confusing description, but you know, you can edit this out if you wish. So what is interesting, obviously that exhibition, Gender Check, it was huge event which included hundreds of artists from all Eastern and Central European countries, basically all countries which had historically been which historically had a state socialist system. So it was a huge exhibition, and it's really difficult to say how much one or the other artist managed to draw attention to their work. I do remember that Reet Varblane, who has been working a lot with Anu Põder and who has also curated her personal exhibitions after that codex, which I already mentioned in 1994. She also published the first catalogue of Anu Põder, and she later recalled that when she was attending the conference of Gender Check in Vienna, she was also distributing those catalogues of Anu Põder there, and sort of regretfully, she says that, you know, there was perhaps they didn't attract as much attention as she would have liked. But I suppose this had to do with the fact that it was such a massive event with so many artists, and of course Anu Põder was represented with just one work there. But another important step towards international recognition of Anu Põder was her retrospective exhibition in Estonian Art Museum Kumu in 2017. And that was curated by feminist curator Rebecca Põldsam. And that was the first time when Anu Põder's work was put in conversation with the work of other feminist artists, not from Estonia, but from different countries. And I'm just mentioning that, you know, there were only 6 artists in addition. Sorry, altogether, I correct. Altogether, there were 6 artists, Anu Põder and 5 other artists, 3 of whom were young contemporary artists, but in terms of historical importance, who were juxtaposed with Anu Põder's work were Anna Mendieta and the Polish-French sculptor Alina Szapocznikow. So in this exhibition, the curator was really interested in the question how specific types of experiences are conveyed in a similar artistic language in the works of very different artists who are not aware of each other, who live in different times and in different cultural contexts. And the exhibition was entitled Be Fragile, Be Brave, obviously taking a cue from that statement of Anu Põder, which I also quoted before, that she, from her disappointment and from her fragility and frustration and her weakness, perhaps as she called it, she managed to create such a powerful and engaging art. So that was obviously one of the steps, very important step, which firmly placed Anu Põder in the context of contemporary feminist interpretation and feminist discourse. At that exhibition, perhaps the emphasis, especially the interpretative emphasis, was on female subjectivity and representation of female body. But along these issues, also different types of Anu Põder's works were exhibited. So it really worked, predominantly it was her retrospective. And then in addition, sort of a conversation with the works of other artists working in a similar artistic language. So the other works evoked very much the personal and collective memory, and these were not so much concentrated on the embodiment, the female subjectivity and the embodiment, but they were evoking through symbolic objects, evoking collective memory, personal memory, and they were relating to rural life and farm life and the land. And this is something which Anu Põder also was very familiar with. So I also wanted to mention the work Claude Hopper, Food Space of a 20th Century Man, which was also an installation from 1999, which was also exhibited in 2017. And this installation, the central sort of element of that installation is inside sort of space from a typical footwear of farmers and soldiers, which obviously evokes the references to rural identity of Estonians, as well as to potentially cultural trauma. And another work from the same period, which from 1998, was Tongues. And there are two versions of that installation, which consist of the magnified forms of human tongues, and these are made from soap. So in Estonian language, as those who speak it and know that there is no difference, we have the same word for the tongue and language. So the connotation of just the bodily element is somehow not necessarily sidelined, but it's a reference to a language in the global age, which also Anu Põder herself has described, that potential interpretation of that installation, that it could be seen as evoking certain questions or issues about what happens to language in the global age. So that there is this interesting double play of how we can look at this work. And that work is also important in international recognition of Anu Põder's work, because the first version of that work belongs to the collection of Estonian Art Museum, but the second version of this installation was in 2021 purchased by Tate Modern, and that was it's important to note that actually was making Anu Põder the first Estonian artist who entered this prestigious collection. And finally, of course, the same year in 2021, Cecilia Alemani, the curator of the current exhibition, she included Anu Põder's works in the main exhibition of the Venice Biennale, and that was kind of, you know, another important sign of her incorporation, not any longer just into the local context of feminist discourse, but by now she has earned her rightful place in the context of European feminist art. And yeah, so I think this was the very brief timeline, and I would like to stop here, but if you have any other questions, Maria, we can come back to maybe what I said.
Yes, I think let's come back to it, because I mean, you touched upon so many important topics, and before we are kind of entering the contemporary moment and the role of Anu Põder's artwork in that context, I would still dig into these questions of materials, because also, Katrin, you mentioned that Anu Põder was really like exceptional in her use of materials, didn't go align with kind of this scene or what was used. So she was like experimenting and being really kind of, created this kind of a new understanding, a new reading, or brought completely something new into the sculpture scene here. So Edith, maybe you as a sculptor would like to comment on it, like how much working conditions, I mean, studios, life around, and so on, how much these kind of things influence the choices for the materials, if you look at Anu's practice, or even if you think it through your own practice?
Yeah, hello everyone, and I'm very honored to be with this respected people here. Yeah, the thing is, as I'm not an art historian, I'm just a simple artist, and there's the only possibility how I can talk about Anu is through myself and through maybe my practice also, because I compare myself with her, and this is the way I can do this talk right here, right now. So with Anu, I must start from the beginning, when I first kind of acknowledged her presence. It came by surprise, because somehow, I don't know, maybe I was missing the lectures of the school or something, but I never had actually heard about her, because when I studied sculpture, then the funny thing is that all my teachers actually were the Bronze Age sculptors, actually, and they were all male teachers, and the only material I had from when I was beginning with my studies was actually a huge box of clay, and because of the money and this kind of thing. So I also have this I had like Bronze Age teachers, but they were already, we're talking about 90s and the beginning of 2000s, but they were like, they were trying to understand already the new waves and things. So it was very unsure ground where I started to, I don't know what would be this word, but where I raised up somehow. So it is, I think, very interesting that no one actually mentioned ever Anu Põder to me. And I remember the first work I actually saw was this, I say the name, I know it's in Estonian, but in English it's this lectern. She was using their only wood and little glass filled with water, and it gave me a very, very, very strong impression somehow. And for me also, because like I said, the only material we had, like we really could use like amounts of clay in my studies there. But when I saw this work, then it was very somehow eye-opening also, because I understood that there is a possibility to be a sculptor, but also use different kind of materials instead of figurative molding and sculpting things. So it was interesting. But now, when I was asked to participate here, I have been reading a little bit more about her, and the more I read about her, the more I was interested actually about the materials she was using, because like I said, I was raised in an environment with only clay and so on. And when I read that she was a single mom with 3 children, she got her first child. I mean, when she finished studies, then she already became mother, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, I also have a kid. I'm a freelance artist, and the more I think about this, to be a single mom in Soviet time, where people, if they wanted to go to a shop, they couldn't just buy food. They had to have those little talongs, so they could get something. And I know that she belonged also to the Union of Artists, and they like spared those talongs. But as I have heard from different kind of places, that it wasn't always that she got those talongs to get to go to the store to buy food. Maybe it's a legend, but I have heard this, and this made me feel also that maybe her fellow sculptors also felt that she's like maybe too different to get the same kind of treatment as there, and so on. But I think this gap happened probably. I mean, it's so hard to be an artist, freelance artist, even with 1 kid nowadays, and I can't even imagine what a struggle it has been in these times. It's like it hurts me even thinking about this, actually. And I know that I use my materials usually only because of my what are my possibilities. Money-wise, usually this is it. It always dictates my choice of materials. And if we go back now to this info that the single mom with 3 living in Soviet time, she had this, I know she was also studying sewing and living in highest apartment in Lasnamäe. It's the sleeping area artist actually had apartments, studio apartments there, and this was her studio. So this classical sculpture, no way you could have done your classical sculpting art in this kind of environments. You just have to figure out how to manage to do what you have to do in your way. And like Katrin said, fragility is into strengths, and I think this is what I think being an artist, this is maybe the key statement, even somehow fragilities to strengths. I think I have been also trying to work my fragilities to my strengths, because if you're not maybe so good in one thing, or you have not opportunities to use whatever materials, then you just have to start figure out how to manage to survive with the things you have, the opportunities you have. And I think without knowing her personally, I have met her twice though, I have this inner feeling that she had a hard life, and considering that the work she has done is incredible, because I see there so much strength, and also this what is this word now? There's strength and also some kind of sadness, and sadness mixed with even weird to say gauziness also, because her work, I don't know, maybe every time you see a fabric, like a material as fabric, then it makes already a gauzy feeling in someone's head. But for me, even more, I see somehow this struggle of life somehow. Every work is deep struggle somehow. And if we talk more about the material she was using, I actually went to talk with her friend Mare Mikov. She's like also a fellow sculptor, and they were friends. And Mare Mikov, she has like managed to be this so-called real sculptor. Then if we are talking about this Bronze Age sculptors, she worked basically most of the time with bronze and those bigger scale works. And when I asked her why did Anu Põder use those materials she was using then, and was she herself thinking herself as a feminist artist, and Mara actually said that she didn't identify herself at all like a feminist artist, and most of the time she was only very interested in the technique, how to make the thing she had in her mind. And I think this is actually the main thing or similar thing with sculptors, that you always struggle with the question of the techniques, how to make some things to work out, because there's so many layers. You want them to stand up, and it's always there are always so many questions about how to work those things out. and she wasn't different at all from others in these questions, because she was, as Mikko said, very interested about those questions, how to build those things she was building, and all the technical questions. And she was struggling with them more than the maybe even the meanings of the words. But I doubt that if I look at her works, like I said, they were so strong with all the emotions somehow. So I think she was just very not open with her inner life. And also what I heard, for me, it was interesting because this specific material she was using, this plastic, this bodily pink plastic, even nowadays, it's hard to, I don't know, if I would like to have an image, this skin toned surface, it would be, to me, a struggle to manage to do that. And she has, in this hard time, she managed to get this very interesting material, this plastic. And I asked about this also from Mara, where did she get this plastic? And she said that her brother was a surgeon, and she got the material from her brother. And Mara was even, she said that it was such a good material. I would have also wanted to use this, but I had no access to this. So again, it's about accessibility, how you can get some material. And if you get some material, then you start using it and play around with it. And so for me, it was interesting to hear about this, because I think this pink plastic in Estonian context is no one else has ever used that material in this way at all. And what I also admire in her work is this sensitive composition. There's like, whatever work I look, I see that there's the composition is just, you can't take anything away, you can't put anything more there, it's just perfect, the composition. And this is also very interesting, this perfectionism in composition. And it's just very pleasant to look at also. And what I want to also talk about is one work. It's this, was it Ancient Light, maybe? And this is also something, it's so simple. It's also what I want to point out, the disease of sculptures is that we are very material based and very interested always in materials. And sometimes when you're so interested in all kinds of materials, then you always get more skills about all kinds of materials. It's like lifelong learning. And the more you know about them, and the more you feel skillful, then sometimes you forget how to, that there is a possibility to do some works more simple way. I mean, without not building from the start something. And with this Ancient Light work, I see this simplicity, simplicity, and in the simplicity is so much power in it. I am that kind of person who overwork all the time with my body, because I have also this disease that I wanna. The more I put my body into it, my sweat, my muscles, then it's a real thing. But this work, this ancient light, actually again brings me back time to time to doing a bit more like to calm down and understand. I will understand that it's not about killing yourself with all the skills you have, that sometimes it's very okay to just put the thought into it and just some little bit extra. And she also was very strong with those simple powerful works. And I think it's I would like to be like her, let's be honest. But I am who I am, and she was who she was. She came from that time, I came from that time, and like I said, I do also try to put my fragilities into strengths, and I struggle every day with this everyday life, to be a mother, to be an artist. But I still think that in my case, I'm in a good spot. But she came from a hardcore time, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that the work, the environment, and the place where she came, and the single mom aspect is for me very, I think, important aspect, considering everything.
Yeah, I think in what Edith said, like this context of time, and also what Katrin opened up, this generation who was born in like 40s, because Anu was born in 47. So entire generation born in 40s is this artist generation in Estonia who lived through so many changes. I would say that, you know, living in a Soviet time, having this kind of like limited access to the information, sometimes to materials and so on, but you had like, you build up your artistic life in a really, really certain context. Yes, you might be alone if you're a bit more experimenting. It wasn't only Anu, it was like Elo Järv, many other artists. As soon as you are a bit more experimenting, you are alone in your discourse, or almost alone. You don't have this kind of discussion or discussion partners. And I would say this hasn't changed so much in these days, because I mean, the scale of our art world is small. What we have now, we have accessibility to kind of, we are connected to the wider world. So it's not so disconnected. But I think also, if you think of Anu, still a bit more of this time context than 90s, what happened in Estonia when we gained independence, then everything like opened up, or there was such a hunger for new media and kind of fast video, so on. So also the kind of entire art world, I would say, collapsed or kind of reshaped itself. And then with Zeros, it kind of established a bit more of the stable and being aligned with kind of this Western logic. And I think by now we are trying to find, like, let's say, appreciate our localities, and like not talking anymore about like Estonian art history and world art history, that we're understanding that we are part of this world. Unfortunately or fortunately, because of our geographical locations, I think we are always on this like edge of Europe, which means that you are not always part of this kind of this discourse or discussion. And even more because of those facts, it's really, really amazing to discuss Anu Põder's work in the international context, and to be able to see her works in that context, because that's where she belongs rightfully. But Berit, now listening Katrin and Edith's reflections on Anu's practice, and you have been working past year quite thoroughly and deeply with the exhibition in Shush. but also since 2019 you have been working with Anu's archive. And how would you reflect on like Anu's practice and her position in Estonian art, and kind of also maybe because you have like the insight of the things what maybe rest of us don't. So would you like to kind of open up what have you found from the archive, and is there still something to discover?
Thank you, Maria. I'm really honored to be in this panel. And I have to say that during the past year, there have been so much information, so much emotions concerning Anu's art, and everything connected to the such a big event, preparing for the catalog. So maybe it's a bit difficult to concentrate on this work only. I think I have to start from the first impressions I got from Anu's art. It was, again, the 90s when I was an art student. And there were two exhibitions that Katrin already mentioned. The Codex in 1994 and Estonia as a Sign from 96, which I remember better, and especially Anu's cut fur coats that really impressed me at that time. And then everything that followed, but then the earlier work was introduced to me much later when Anu wasn't anymore among us. So I would say that working with Anu's archive and her heritage, then everything that goes further back is more enigmatic and maybe more interesting. And also for the curators, I think, and for the art lovers, it has been more difficult to get the stories behind her works, because he didn't explain that much about her earlier works. I think that was also, like Edith said, that connected to the materiality and the techniques and quite a lot of explaining how she did those things, and about the forms and achieving the perfect form under this slight inferiority complex that she felt during this Bronze Age. So while preparing now for this exhibition, because it indeed has been the largest of Anu's exhibitions I have worked with, I searched a lot, and I would say I became a little bit obsessed with this to find the stories and also about how she started. And I might say it's maybe unfortunately or maybe fortunately that the earliest works that one of Anu's daughters came with were already in a very late phase of the preparation, so they didn't reach the exhibitions. And also I think that none of the curators or art historians have seen them are Anu's drawings from the early 70s, when she was still an art student and in the Art Academy, the State Art Institute. And when we look at Anu's artistic path, then actually she studied for 9 years, which is quite a long period. She started in Tartu Art School and then entered the Art Institute. That it's a really long period compared to current art education. I think that many study 3 years, perhaps 5 years, but not that long. Of these very early works go even further back from her daughter's memories. So there have been some little bits of information from her former husband, and with whom they were actually working really closely during that time when they were students, Jüri Kask, and also some interviews where Anu hints a little bit on what was the driving force behind her art these days. For example, I remember from from one interview, she telling that she thought that fine art and poetry also always go closely together, and that she was quite sentimental kind of a poet back then when she studied. So maybe these really, I would call them surreal, and she has mentioned this surrealism also as one of her influences somewhere else in an interview, that these kind of surreal drawings really show this kind of inner poetry or heart of a poet when she wasn't yet a single mother, when she even wasn't identifying herself that strongly with being a sculptor, I think, yet. I'd like to also to refer to this sculptor's identity, because as Katrin said, that Anu wasn't a member of any art group, which I think it's true. But on the other hand, they had a really strong group of friends or co-sculptors with whom they like socialized. They were socializing. They had a common shared studio before she moved up to this the Lasnamäe, the upper floor of the blockhouse. And I would say, you can edit maybe say that I'm wrong, but that the Sculptors Association and also the sculptors, they have always had quite a strong identity of being sculptors, because nowadays we call Anu also installation artist, but she never called herself an installation artist. She was a sculptor, and from all the interviews, I even can't remember herself of calling her just artist. She was always talking about viewing things as a sculptor and doing things as a sculptor, even with the really back then innovative materials. And also if you look at her earlier exhibitions, then many of them, they were initiated by the Sculptors Association also, or some already during the international times after the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was some like the Sculpture Quadrennial and quite sculpture-centered exhibitions, until she was discovered by the curators in the 90s and put in a different context as a feminist artist. And even that the Sculptors Association actually in Estonian is called Kujurite Ühendus, and this, now we go to the linguistics again, but Katrin already opened that linguistics channel for me. So Estonian word for sculptor, we also use the Latin sculptor, but the real Estonian word, which is a bit archaic, is kujur, and that is like a statue maker, to have a right translation to that. So actually this Sculptors Association calling itself Kujurite Ühendus, then like the Statue Makers Association, is kind of archaic, but also positioning the sculptures very strongly on this kind of classical sculptures field. Even they later on started to do something different.
Or maybe even not only statues, but this kujur is also like someone who kind of shapes everything into the kind of like figures, basically, like a figure maker.
Like a statue or figure. So this kind of abstract, and as Anu has also told, that when she was practicing these new materials in the 80s, she was still thinking constantly of how they would stay together, how they would stand up. That was part of the education of the sculptors, to make things solid and to last as a form, or stand up as a form, that they wouldn't be like laying on the ground. And then when she started to talk about the 90s or even the 2000s, when the performance art and everything appeared in Estonian art scene, that she felt it kind of liberating, that she didn't need to think of her works as this kind of a solid sculptures. And I remember in one interview she was quite proud that that when the Estonian Art Museum acquired her first work, which was the composition with ropes from 1983, she was proud that this artwork, which didn't resemble any something that we could call a statue, that was acquired by the art museum as the first of her works.
Maybe a couple of more things which I would like to kind of reflect on. It is one which Katrin and also Berit touched upon a bit, is this kind of influences that, as Katrin said, it wasn't like completely cut out world. Like, I mean, there was information coming in through the art magazine and so on. And I think art students and young artists at the time were really eager and hungry for this information. But who would you bring out as kind of like, or is there any knowledge about like who Anu admired as an artist, or even like, I mean, international, but also locally, like from her contemporaries or from our own art history?
Well, one thing which has been mentioned in some of the articles, and also I suppose in her interviews, if I remember correctly, was Ülo Õun.
Exactly.
And Olavi Männi, who was their teacher at the Art State Institute, I thought was also mentioned somewhere in some context. But another story which I remember from one of the interviews with Anu Põder was that when she finally had an opportunity to travel, and she saw for the first time works of a Polish artist, Magdalena Abakanowicz, then she had a sense of recognition. But that meant she didn't know about her works, but it's almost like she recognized the kindred spirit. So at least she consciously, obviously, didn't remember her works. And so these are some of the, well, certainly, I'm sure there are other artists maybe with whom she felt such a kinship, but I remember from one of her interviews, she certainly mentions Abakanowicz and how she recognized, and she thought, yes, because obviously, especially that work, or quite a lot of her works. When I sort of saw them and looked at them as an art historian, because I knew already by then works of Magdalena Abakanowicz. So I thought, I also looking from, from the side basically, and not knowing whether artists had this kinship or what have you. There was something, you could kind of recognize that they think along the same lines, and they, experiment with similar artistic languages. But that's why also Rebecca, how she built up her exhibition in the 2017 exhibition. She didn't, her stand, she didn't argue that somehow Anu was consciously influenced by, let's say, Anna Mendieta and Alina Szapocznikow, because obviously I don't think she was aware of their works, but basically the idea was to look at how different artists from different cultural contexts and time periods kind of address the same something in a similar artistic language. But certainly she has mentioned a couple of Estonian sculptors who were more open to experimentation, and Ülo Õun was one of them, yes. And then, of course, you're absolutely right, Berit. It's true that they had the friendships and they shared the studio with other women artists. But it was not a formal sort of, not an official art group.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant. That they had like I think that this kind of circle of up to 10 artists that their background was also sculpture.
Yes.
So they were like kind of yeah, they were socializing, they were sharing ideas perhaps, but they never formed any official group. There was one exhibition in Tartu Art Museum where there were 4 of them exhibiting together. But again, the exhibition was called Sculptures. So basically they didn't form. I can show it later on the as a visual, this small catalog of this exhibition. But if you call the exhibition Sculptures, you don't have like a common platform hidden under this name. So which I also found very interesting from her interview to Jaan Elken, which is in this book as well, that she is mentioning not only artists' name who were inspiring her, but she is also mentioning like the list of names that I should explain longer to the international audience. She's mentioning Kongo, Starkov, Kits, Hermaküla, Unt, Vilimaa, meaning that these were people from the field of culture, but from other disciplines like writers or from theater, or it wasn't that the influence was solely artistic or in the arts or fine arts. So it was the whole field of culture. And also what to say about the Soviet era, that also since the Second World War, the Soviet era also passed different periods. There were sudden openness, like during the Khrushchev's time and the Cold War, and then when even the information from the US was let in, like to that the Soviet people would become more competitive. They had to know what's happening behind the Iron Curtain, like for a certain time, and then it suddenly closed again totally. And where Anu said that the 80s were full of angst and people were really feeling without any information or contacts. And so I think that for these people who had experienced this kind of a mild melt period before that, when Anu started to become an artist, and then when this kind of total closed society like dropped on their heads, to say that they feel even more oppressed by it than those who hadn't experienced any earlier times. So it was, in that sense, the Soviet era was so complicated, and especially when people didn't have any knowledge or any hope about the future, that how would it go, that you basically you see no light at the end of tunnel. So until the very end of the 80s, maybe.
Can I just add one thing, Maria? Is it okay?
No, of course.
Yeah, because it was really, I was also, because it's so difficult to remember everything you want to say, and but I really liked what also Edith was saying about the constant struggle with the, between the creation and the everyday. And this is something, again, from a point of view of women's history, it has to be emphasized, and Edith, actually mentioned it, that the whole, especially the stagnation period, sort of late 70s, early 80s, this is when Anu Põder became an artist, that there was a constant shortage of everything. And of course, this shortage continued into the late 80s and early 90s, just before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So, and also what is important that one of the area which was completely undervalued and underlooked, and also the goods which were necessary for bringing up the family and for female hygiene, that was one of the type of goods which wasn't even available, not to talk about the variety of food. So this was also like, an extra burden and a struggle for an artist who is as a single mother and being a woman and living in this society which actually didn't deliver for the women's needs, despite the fact that at the same time, there were kindergartens and the education was for free because that was part of the Soviet system, and that was good part of it. But at the same time, it was also that the women were all expected to carry the double burden, if not triple burden. So that relates very much to what Edith was saying.
Yeah, because the ideological background was this female emancipation, which kind of let us think that, but it's actually like a double shift in a way. But to look at the time and to wrap it up, also, like, I actually wanted to touch briefly maybe this kind of question of reception also, like how, I don't know how briefly can we touch such a huge topic also, like, because I think what we keep repeating that Anu's work is maybe even perceived like there are like 3 different periods to perceive it in a way. In Anu's case, like I think Anu's practice, to simplify it the most, it's kind of like this period where she was really inward thinking and working with this womanhood and motherhood, and then later period with independent Estonia, when she was commenting maybe a bit more like outward looking, commenting more like societal issues. But if to kind of comment briefly, like how Anu's work were perceived, like, I don't know, Soviet time, 90s, and in the contemporary moment, because I think the shift in a way, like there are like several shifts in that perception also.
Who will
Was
start?
that a question to Berit? Yes.
To all of you. I don't direct now the questions. Or is there anything like what you would like to bring out? If not, also we can drop this question and move to the last one. If you kind of want to conclude this panel, maybe all of you could comment this from the contemporary perspective, like Anu's importance, or where do you see her in this current moment? Because obviously she's like, as said, rightfully taken her place in the contemporary art scene. So yeah, basically, how would you comment her journey to that? Who wants to start? I don't know.
This is a difficult question, of course, because obviously, I mean, to be honest with you, when I prepared for this talk and short presentation, and when I kind of outlined those exhibitions and the timeline of what had happened, it just, as I said, it seems logical. I mean, it was waiting to happen, and I'm really glad that it has happened, because it's kind of sad, obviously, that she herself couldn't see that international.
It makes me so sad somehow. You have to die.
Because now she has got so many dialogue partners, both from the past and from present. But it kind of makes sense. But that, that is somehow this is so often the fate of the artist, that it takes a very long time for the proper context and proper understanding and appreciation of their work to emerge. And I think this is also what happened to Anu Põder.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it's exactly with many of this generation artists, or even like older generation, this kind of case to look at things. It's always there, but just the kind of context and time around the influences is so much that your focus is shifting like somewhere else. And I mean, in Anu's case, she was always exhibiting artists, that she wasn't like undiscovered artist, but maybe the contextualization and reading of her work, which is kind of like, which now has got its fullest power, and not now, but already like past 10 to 20 years maybe.
Because it's true. I mean, there were, because obviously the first the first time when actually Estonian artists had the opportunity to work internationally, that opportunity opened properly, let's say, only in the 1990s. And for whatever reasons, whether it's the personality or the lack of the right connections, or the perhaps also there were not, I don't know, not the lack of communication between the art institutions, because at the time there were different type of artists who were also put forward and imported, you know, and presented from Estonian side, because as you said yourself, the interest was somewhere else. The interest was in multimedia, video, photography, performance, all this new type of very engaging, you know, sort of not necessarily even socially engaging. It would have been also existential, but it's just like for some reason she didn't have that backing, perhaps also in the form of a supportive curator or somebody. So it didn't happen then at the time. Somehow her work translated into international context much later. Could have happened already in the 1990s, in fact, but it didn't.
Good.
Yeah.
I just quickly say one thing, that I am lucky at the moment to work together with very many young people. I mean, 20s, people who are in 20s, and if I have asked them about Anu Põder, they know very much about her. So it means that Anu now in this newer generation, she's very, very well known, and I think she's much she's like more known than maybe in my generation, I guess, because they're very knowledge about her work, and that they sense the importance of her, and that's, I think, really cool.
Yes, what I wanted to say about the 90s also, that when the curator started to be in search of feminist art in our region, then the younger artists were so much louder in feminism, in the sense of feminism. They were louder, they were expressing their ideas, either visually strong, or even like literally strong, with strong feminist messages. And Anu was so silent that at that time, even there was such an urge to go to the international art scene with the feminist art that nobody even had time to read between the lines, I think, because she had written everything between the lines. And then just the younger and louder feminists reached that art scene much quicker, and she stayed behind as a very private and quiet artist. And only now, when maybe also the art scene got tired of this louder kind of feminism or feminist art, that the curators had time or also interest to look into these kind of hidden messages and interpreting all this just now, which is too late for Anu, like personally, but not too late for her art.
I think it's a beautiful note to end our panel. Thank you so much, Katrin, Berit, and Edith, for sharing your thoughts on Anu. I think, as said, it's never too late for Anu's work. So I hope all of us, we can see it in some point or somewhere in some point in the world. So, but thank you so much, and thank you for the exhibition. So we had a reason to talk about Anu again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.